The hangar was hidden under black stone cliffs, far away from the alien city. It was not a place where anyone went freely. The girl walked quickly, her steps light but full of fear. She kept looking behind her, making sure no guard followed. The human pilot walked beside her, confused but curious. His hands brushed the cold walls of the tunnel as he whispered, asking her why she brought him here. She only shook her head and said softly that he would see soon. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. The roof was so high that shadows covered the corners, and the air was thick with silence. In the middle of the hangar stood something that stole his breath away. A ship, ancient and enormous, rested on the stone floor. Its body was silver, but not dull. It glowed faintly, as if alive. Strange lines ran across its hull, forming patterns that looked like veins. Dust lay heavy on the ground, but the ship itself was untouched by time. The girl's eyes were wide. Even though she had seen it before, her heart beat fast every time. She whispered that this was the sacred one, the ship that had been here long before her people even learned to fly. Generations had tried to awaken it. Great kings, queens, and priests had touched its walls, spoken the chants, spilled the sacred blood, but nothing ever happened. It remained silent for centuries, a sleeping giant. And yet, none dared to destroy it, for the stories said that one day it would wake again. The human stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching on the stone. He asked why she brought him here, if this place was forbidden. Her throat felt tight. She confessed that something inside her told her he was different. Since the day she saw him fly his own ship with such wild courage, she wondered if he could do what no alien ever had. Her voice shook as she admitted that if anyone found them here, they would both be punished, maybe killed. The human gave a crooked smile, half in disbelief, half in challenge. He walked closer to the ship. The air around it felt heavier, like the space itself pressed down. His hand hovered over the strange surface, but he stopped when he saw her trembling. She whispered that no one touched it without permission from the council. Her people believed it was cursed to burn the unworthy. But the human was not afraid. He placed his palm on the cold hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft pulse ran under his skin. The alien girl gasped. Lines on the ship lit up in glowing blue, spreading outward like rivers of fire. The whole hangar shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the silent chamber filled with a humming sound, deep and alive. The girl's knees nearly gave out. She could not believe what she was seeing. The ship's lights grew brighter. Symbols appeared on its surface, dancing like fireflies, rearranging themselves into shapes the human could almost read. He pulled his hand back in shock, but the lights did not fade. They followed him, glowing brighter when his heartbeat raced. The ship was alive, responding to him as if it had waited for this moment for centuries. The alien girl covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. She whispered that this was impossible. Not even the high priests, not even the royal bloodlines could wake it. Yet here was a stranger, a human, doing what her entire species could not. Fear and awe battled inside her chest. She did not know if this was a miracle or a disaster. A loud alarm echoed from the tunnel behind them. Guards had heard the tremors. Red lights began to flash along the walls. Heavy boots struck the stone floor, rushing closer. The girl panicked. She told him they had to leave before the council saw this. If they caught him here, they would not only execute him, but also erase her from her clan for bringing him. But the ship had other plans. The ground shook harder as the vessel gave out a low roar, like thunder trapped in its heart. The stone floor cracked beneath its weight. The alien girl stumbled and clutched his arm, her breath ragged. She could hear the soldiers shouting in the tunnel, but she could not look away from the ship. Its lights wrapped around the human like a halo, making him look less like a man and more like a figure from legend. The human stared at the glowing lines, his face half lit in blue fire. For the first time, he felt something pulling inside his chest, a call he could not explain. He whispered that the ship knew him. The girl froze at his words. Her people's oldest stories spoke of a skybearer, one who was not of their kind, one who would come from the stars to lead the ship into battle once more. She never believed those stories. Now her heart pounded with the truth she did not want to accept. The guards' voices grew closer, their weapons ready. The girl grabbed his wrist, begging him to run, but he did not move. His eyes were locked on the ship, on the ancient craft that breathed with him. The alien girl's fear deepened, not just of the soldiers, but of what this moment meant. The forbidden hangar was no longer silent. The old ship was alive, and it had chosen someone no one ever expected. The sound of boots crashed through the tunnel, and the guards appeared with weapons drawn. But before they could fire, the ship's hull shone so brightly that the whole chamber became light. The guards froze, stunned, their eyes wide with terror. The alien girl stood between them and the human, her heart torn in two. She knew nothing would ever be the same again. The hangar shook with a deep sound, as if the earth itself had awakened. The human kept his hand on the glowing surface while the alien girl stared at him, her chest rising and falling with panic. The blue lines spread across the ship like veins of fire until the whole vessel glowed. The hum grew louder, and then, without warning, the ground trembled harder, making dust rain down from the ceiling. The girl whispered that he had to stop. Her voice cracked with fear, but her words felt powerless. The ship was no longer silent. It was answering him. He pulled his hand away, but the lights did not fade. Instead, they grew stronger, almost as if the ship's heartbeat had joined with his own. His chest rose sharply as he felt something pressing into his mind, a rhythm, a connection he could not explain. Then the ship released a low vibration, and symbols appeared in the air above the hull. They shimmered, floating like smoke yet sharp like carved stone. The human squinted at them, tilting his head as if he almost understood. The girl gasped, recognizing the marks as sacred words her people had studied for centuries, but never unlocked. She whispered that only the Skybearer could read them. His silence made her heart drop, because from his face, she knew he understood far more than he should. A sudden alarm shrieked through the hangar. Red lights lit up along the walls, and the sound of heavy boots echoed. Guards were pouring in through the tunnel, their weapons charged and ready. The girl's breath caught. She knew they would not show mercy. They would kill the human before anyone could question the council. The human turned his head toward the noise, but the ship reacted faster. The hull burst with light, throwing a wave of energy outward. A dome of blue force snapped into existence around the ship, spreading across the hangar. The shockwave threw the guards backward. They hit the walls and fell, their weapons clattering away. The alien girl stumbled but found herself inside the circle, untouched, standing beside the human. Her hands shook as she pressed them to the glowing barrier. It was solid as stone, yet made of pure light. The guards shouted from the outside, their faces pale with terror. None of them had ever seen the ship move. The girl whispered that they were trapped, but the human shook his head. He felt the ship was not a prison, it was protection. The humming grew louder, rising into a high tone that made the walls tremble. The ground beneath the ship cracked, and then, with a slow groan, the vessel lifted from the stone floor. Dust and debris swirled around its base as the massive craft rose into the air for the first time in thousands of years. The girl fell to her knees, staring with wide eyes. She could not believe she was inside the legend itself. Her whole life, she had been told this was only a relic, a dead shell of old times. And now, it was alive. All because of him. The human stepped closer, almost pulled forward by invisible hands. A panel opened on the side of the ship, forming a doorway that glowed with pale light. The girl whispered in disbelief that no one had ever been allowed inside. He looked back at her with a strange calm in his eyes and stepped through the door. She hesitated, but the thought of being left behind was worse than breaking the laws of her people. She ran after him, her heart thundering in her chest. Inside, the ship was unlike anything she imagined. The walls glowed with soft blue light, and the floor felt alive, pulsing under their feet. Strange shapes hovered in the air, shifting into patterns as the human walked past them. The ship responded to him, not her. Every surface seemed to breathe when he touched it. She whispered that it was choosing him. He ignored her words, his eyes fixed on the strange chair at the center. It looked less like a seat and more like a throne, grown from the floor itself. He sat down slowly, and the entire ship shuddered. The lights flared, and the humming deepened into a steady beat, like a heart. His eyes widened as the symbols on the walls rearranged themselves into star maps, vast and endless. He gripped the armrests, his breath fast, but the ship seemed to steady him. Outside, the guards were screaming for backup. Alarms rang across the city, and high above, the alien council would already know the Sacred One had awakened. The girl's stomach twisted. If the council arrived, they would destroy the human before admitting the truth. Her people would never allow an outsider to claim the ship. The ship seemed to sense the threat. Without warning, it lifted higher, passing through the broken ceiling of the hangar. Stone rained down as the dome of light cut through the roof like paper. The human's eyes widened as the craft broke free, and suddenly the city stretched out below them. Towers gleamed in the night, alarms flashing, crowds gathering in panic as the sacred vessel rose into the air. The alien girl pressed her hands to the glass-like wall, her breath fogging it as she stared down. She could hear faint cries of worship and fear from her people. Many dropped to their knees, believing the prophecy had come true. Others screamed for soldiers to attack. She turned to the human, her voice trembling, asking if he understood what he had done. He only stared forward, his hands tightening on the glowing controls that now formed around the chair, as if molded for him alone. The ship tilted, and with a sudden burst of energy, it soared into the night sky. The city lights fell away as the stars opened above them. The girl clung to the wall, her body shaking with both terror and awe. The human did not move like a trained pilot, but the ship moved with him, following his instincts as if it was part of him. For centuries, her people had prayed, sacrificed, and failed. And now, in a single night, a stranger had become what they could not. The girl's heart twisted with fear of what her people would do next. But deep inside, another feeling grew. A dangerous hope that maybe this human really was the one the story spoke of. The city below was chaos. Bells rang from tall towers, alarms howled across the streets, and soldiers filled the skies in their sharp-winged crafts. The council had ordered them to destroy the human before the people believed too much in what they saw. The alien girl clutched the glowing wall of the ship, her voice shaking as she begged him to stop before it was too late. But the human only sat in the throne-like chair, his eyes fixed forward, his hands gripping the controls that shaped themselves perfectly around his fingers. Outside, the sacred ship glowed brighter than the moons. The blue energy pulsed like a living star, covering its hull with light. The soldiers tried to circle it, shouting commands to one another, but none dared fly too close. Fear gripped them. Their ancestors had written of this very moment when the ship would wake and rise. But they never imagined it would obey an outsider, a human with no royal blood, no sacred rite, no priest's blessing. The council arrived in their towering crafts, their flags of power waving. The high voice of the council shouted through a speaker that the human was a thief, a defiler, and must surrender at once. His crime was touching what no one was worthy of. The girl trembled when she heard their order. She knew what came next. They would kill him in front of everyone to prove no human could ever be chosen. The human looked at her with steady eyes. He did not speak, but she saw something unshakable inside him. The ship hummed as if answering his silence. Then, before the council could fire, the vessel lifted higher into the clouds. The energy shield expanded, forcing the smaller crafts away. Weapons discharged, bolts of fire shot through the air, but every strike faded against the glowing barrier. The people in the streets gasped, falling to their knees, many shouting prayers. To them, this was no thief. It was the prophecy alive. The girl's breath came fast. Her whole body shook with fear, yet her heart raced with awe. She whispered to herself that she was witnessing the beginning of a legend. She pressed her forehead against the cool wall of the ship, unable to believe that she was inside it, while her people watched in terror and worship. The human's face tightened as he pulled on the controls. The ship tilted sharply, and then, with a burst of energy, shot upward into the clouds. The force pressed her body into the floor. Her heart jumped as they broke through the storm layer and the stars filled the view above. She had flown many times before in her people's ships, but this was different. This felt alive. The vessel did not move with weight and resistance like their crafts. It moved like it was part of him. In orbit, the ship slowed and steadied, giving them a view of their planet below. The human's chest rose and fell with hard breaths, his hands still gripping the controls, sweat forming on his forehead. He admitted softly that the ship was not just responding to him, it was guiding him. It was as if every motion came from instinct. not training. The girl shivered. Her people's greatest pilots had tried to enter this ship. They had broken bones, burned their skin, even lost their lives when the vessel rejected them. But this human, a stranger, was treated like the chosen one. She could no longer deny it. Her people's stories spoke of a time when the ship would awaken for one who came from beyond, one who carried the untamed spark. She had thought those were just old tales. Now she was staring at the truth. Behind them, the alien warships launched into orbit, chasing them with speed. Dozens of vessels cut across the blackness of space, weapons charging. The girl's panic returned. She begged him to surrender before the council destroyed them both. But the human's jaw clenched. His voice was low, firm, saying that he would not run or bow. The ship answered his will. Panels along its sides opened, glowing with hidden light. Energy wings unfolded like blades, shining brighter than any weapon the aliens had ever built. The girl's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. The sacred ship was preparing for battle. The first shots came from the enemy fleet. Streams of red fire raced toward them, but the barrier flared and deflected the blasts. Then the human gripped the controls tighter. The ship pulsed with energy, and in an instant, beams of blue light erupted from its wings. They cut through the first row of enemy crafts, exploding them into burning fragments. The girl covered her ears as the roar of the ship filled her bones. She had never seen such power. Her people's strongest fleets could not match this. She turned to him, her eyes wide, and asked how he knew what to do. He shook his head, his voice rough, saying he didn't know. He just felt it. More ships closed in. The Council's own flagship loomed ahead, massive and covered in weapons. They ordered every vessel to fire at once. The blackness of space lit up with streaks of fire, all converging on the human's ship. The girl gripped the wall, whispering prayers she had learned as a child. But the human only leaned forward, his face lit with blue light, his eyes unblinking. The sacred vessel spun with speed impossible for its size, dodging blasts as if dancing through the stars. Its weapons flared again, tearing through the enemy ranks. The girl gasped as she realized the human was not fighting alone. The ship itself was alive, teaching him, protecting him, responding to his every thought. Below, the planet watched in silence. From the grand towers of the council to the smallest villages, eyes turned upward, seeing the old prophecy unfold in fire and light. Their voices mixed in fear and worship. Some cried out that the chosen had come. Others shouted that it was blasphemy. But none could deny the truth. They were seeing what no generation before them had ever seen. The girl's heart pounded with confusion. She had grown up loyal to her people, to the council, to the rules. But now she stood beside the human who was reshaping everything with his very presence. She could not decide whether she should fear him or follow him. Her hands shook, her voice broke, but she could not stop staring at him. The ship glowed brighter, each movement more precise, each strike more powerful. The council's fleet was breaking apart, and the people's belief was shifting. The human was no longer just a stranger. He was becoming the legend her world had waited for, the one no alien could ever be, and she knew nothing would ever return to the way it was before. The ship drifted through the silence of space, its glowing hull cutting across the black sky like a star that had awakened after ages of sleep. Inside, the human sat still in the strange living chair while the alien girl stood beside him, her hands pressed tightly together. Her heart was still racing from the battle, her mind unable to believe what she had seen. The fleet of her people had been scattered like insects. The most powerful warships, the pride of the council, had fallen in minutes. And all of it was done by this human and the sacred vessel that chose him. The ship began to change from within. The walls, once smooth and glowing, shifted into patterns. Shapes rose and fell like waves, and then thousands of lights flickered across the surface, forming a vast map. The alien girl's breath caught. She recognized the stars. They were not just stars. These were routes, ancient travel lines between systems long lost to her people. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the glowing lines. She whispered in awe that these were colonies her people had abandoned thousands of years ago. Worlds that had been forgotten when wars and disasters cut them off. Her voice cracked as she admitted that even the council did not know where these routes were anymore. The human stared at the map, his eyes narrowing, as if the patterns made sense to him in a way they never had to her kind. He reached out, and as his finger brushed one of the glowing points, the ship responded instantly. Images appeared in the air, flashes of alien cities, ruins buried under sand, green jungles wrapped around shining temples. It was like the ship was showing him the memories of places no living person had seen in ages. The girl stepped back, fear mixing with awe. She could not understand how he knew what to touch, how he could almost read the ancient language flowing across the map. Her people had studied these symbols for centuries, trying to decode even a single word, but the ship gave them nothing. Yet when the human touched the walls, the symbols bent, rearranged, and revealed their secrets. She asked him in a trembling voice how he could understand. He shook his head slowly, saying he didn't know, but that it felt natural, like the ship was whispering directions into his mind. He admitted that he didn't understand every detail, but he knew what each star meant, where each path led, and which ones were safe. Her eyes widened with fear. She whispered that this was dangerous knowledge. If the council realized he could unlock the maps, they would stop at nothing to capture him. Those lost colonies were more than just history. They were resources, power, and secrets that could change the balance of the galaxy. Her people would not let a human hold such power. Before she could speak further, the ship's walls shifted again, and new images appeared. This time they were not of planets or stars, but of creatures. Massive, shadowy forms with wings of fire and teeth of steel. The human's face hardened. He could feel the ship showing him threats, dangers hidden in the old routes. It was not only a map of where to go, but also a warning of what waited there. The girl hugged herself tightly, whispering that the old stories had always spoken of enemies in the dark. Ancient beasts, rival species, and weapons left behind by the first builders. She had thought those were only tales told to frighten children. Now she saw they were true. The silence inside the ship grew heavier. For the first time since it awakened, the girl saw hesitation in the human's face. His breath slowed, and his eyes seemed distant. She asked if he was afraid. He answered quietly that fear was natural, but what mattered was not running away from it. His words made her chest tighten. He was not only unlocking the ship, he was acting like the kind of leader her people had always claimed to search for but never found. A sudden alarm cut through the silence. The girl spun around, her heart jumping into her throat. From the back of the ship, glowing shapes revealed the approach of dozens of crafts. The council had not given up. Warships were climbing out of the planet's atmosphere, engines burning as they rushed into orbit. The girl could see them on the glowing display, each ship loaded with weapons. Her legs shook. She whispered that they were trapped, but the human only looked at the map again. His hand touched another glowing star route. The ship responded instantly, filling the cockpit with symbols. The girl cried out, begging him not to choose recklessly. She had no idea where that path would lead. But the human only gave her a sharp look and said calmly that staying meant death. The ship roared, and the stars outside shifted. Space itself bent as the craft launched forward with speed she had never felt in her life. Her stomach twisted. Her body pressed against the wall as the vessel tore a hole into the darkness and shot through. The chasing fleet vanished behind them. When the pressure eased, the girl stumbled forward and looked out through the glowing walls. Her breath froze. They were no longer near her home planet. Instead, a massive star burned in the distance, its light spilling across the ruins of a world orbiting it. The planet's surface was cracked and broken, cities in pieces, oceans boiled away. Yet among the ruins, massive structures still glowed faintly, as if waiting. The girl's voice trembled as she whispered that this was one of the old colonies. She had seen sketches in forbidden texts, but she never believed they were real. Her people had told stories that the ancestors left behind treasures and weapons, but also curses that destroyed them. Now she saw the truth with her own eyes. The human stared at the world with narrowed eyes. His grip on the controls tightened. He could feel the ship urging him forward, telling him that their journey was only beginning. The girl stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. She admitted she was afraid, more afraid than ever before. But her voice softened as she said she would stay. Because whatever the ship had chosen him for, she knew she was part of it now too. Behind them, space was no longer silent. The sensors glowed again, warning of pursuit. The Council's warships had not stopped. They had followed the ancient vessel across the stars. The girl's breath caught in her throat. They had run from danger only to land in a place even more dangerous. And now, between the ruins of a dead world and the fury of her people, the human would have to prove once more why the ship had chosen him. The ruined world below looked like a graveyard. Giant cracks split the surface, and broken towers reached toward the sky like the bones of dead giants. The human stared down, his eyes hard, while the alien girl pressed her forehead against the glowing wall, her heart heavy with fear. She whispered that this was once one of the proudest colonies of her people, a place where millions had lived in shining cities. Now there was only silence, a reminder of how quickly power could vanish. The ship floated above the broken land, its lights glowing softly as if recognizing the place. The humans' fingers brushed the controls, and new visions appeared before them. The ship was showing memories, images of the world when it was alive. Crowds of alien children ran through wide streets, markets overflowed with food, and sky-piercing spires glowed with power. Then came fire. The vision turned to war. Monstrous machines tearing the city apart, the skies burning with energy weapons. The girl covered her mouth, tears slipping down her face. She had been told the ancestors simply abandoned this world. But the truth was worse. They had destroyed it themselves. Before she could speak, a warning alarm filled the cockpit. Red symbols glowed on the walls, marking enemy crafts. The Council's fleet had followed them through space. Dozens of warships emerged, spreading out in a deadly formation. At their center was the Queen's flagship, black and sharp like a blade, its weapons bristling with power. The girl's stomach twisted. She whispered that the Queen herself had come. That meant only one thing. This was no longer a mission to capture. It was a mission to kill. The human's eyes narrowed as he watched the ships close in. His hands tightened on the living controls. The girl grabbed his arm, her voice desperate, begging him not to fight. She told him the Queen's fleet was too strong, even for the ancient vessel. Her people had waited their whole lives to see this ship awaken, and if it was destroyed here, the dream would end forever. She begged him to run, to hide, to survive. But the human only shook his head. His voice was calm but firm. He said the ship had not chosen him to run. He said if he ran now, the Queen would chase them across every star. There would be no escape, not for him, not for her. He had to fight. The ship answered his decision. The walls lit up with glowing lines, and hidden panels slid open along the vessel's body. Weapons unfolded, shining like blades of light. Energy gathered, humming with a force that made the girl's skin tingle. She stumbled back, her eyes wide. She realized the ship was far more powerful than even the legends claimed. It was not just a relic. It was a weapon designed for war. The Queen's voice thundered through the comms, filling the air with anger. She called the human an invader, a thief of sacred blood, a parasite who had no right to touch what was theirs. Her words were sharp and venomous, echoing across space. She promised that when his body was turned to ash, her people would forget him, and the legends would return to their rightful place. The girl winced at her queen's fury, her loyalty pulling at her chest. But then she looked at the human, calm and unyielding, sitting in the glowing throne like he belonged there. And for the first time, she wondered if her queen was wrong. The first attack came like a storm. Dozens of warships fired at once, red energy streaking through the black sky. The human gritted his teeth as the ship's barrier flared, absorbing the blasts. The girl clung to the wall, her body shaking with each impact. She whispered that the shield would not hold forever. The human did not answer. He leaned forward, and the ship moved. With speed too fast for its size, the ancient vessel darted through the formation, weaving between enemy fire. Its weapons flared, sending out beams of blue energy that cut through warships as if they were paper. Explosions lit the sky, fragments spinning away into the void. The girl gasped, unable to breathe. She had never seen such destruction. Her people's greatest fleets were falling apart in minutes. But the Queen's flagship did not falter. It charged forward, larger and stronger than the rest. Its weapons glowed, preparing for a strike that could shatter even the ancient ship. The girl screamed for him to move, but the human stayed steady. His eyes locked on the enemy, his hands pressing into the controls. The ship responded instantly, pulling power from deep within its core. The lights around them dimmed as all energy focused into a single pulse. The Queen's ship fired. A beam of red fire, massive and blinding, shot toward them. At the same time, the human released the ship's power. A blue wave burst outward, colliding with the Queen's attack. For a moment, the space between them exploded with light so bright that both fleets went silent, watching in awe. The clash tore through the sky, shaking the ruined planet below. The human gritted his teeth, pushing harder, his whole body trembling as the ship fed on his strength. The alien girl rushed to his side, gripping his shoulder. She begged him to hold on, her voice breaking with fear. And then, with a final burst, the Queen's beam shattered. The blue wave surged forward, slamming into the flagship. The massive vessel spun, its armor cracked, its weapons silenced. The enemy fleet broke apart in panic. Some fled, others fired wildly, but none could match the ancient ship. In minutes, the sky was clear except for burning debris. The human sat back, his chest rising and falling in exhaustion, sweat dripping down his face. The girl stared at him, her heart pounding. She realized she was no longer afraid of him. She was afraid of what he represented. Her people would never forgive this. The Queen would never stop. But deep in her chest, another feeling grew. For the first time, she thought maybe her people's future did not belong to the Queen at all. Maybe it belonged to the human who sat beside her, the one who had done what no alien ever could. The ship glowed softly again, its weapons folding back, its heartbeat steady. The girl whispered that everything had changed. The human looked at her, his voice quiet, saying it was only the beginning. And as the ruined world turned slowly beneath them, both of them knew the war for the galaxy had just begun. The silence after the battle was heavy, almost painful. The stars outside looked calm, but inside the ship the human sat slumped in the glowing chair, his breath sharp and uneven. His hands were still gripping the living controls, though his strength was fading. Sweat dripped from his forehead, his muscles trembling from the effort. The alien girl moved quickly to his side, her heart twisting as she saw how pale he looked. She touched his arm and whispered that he had pushed too far, that no one could survive fighting like that. The ship pulsed with a faint blue glow, almost as if it was alive and tired too. The girl looked around in shock as the walls shifted into soft waves of light. She realized the ship was not only connected to him, it was sharing his exhaustion. The human tried to stand, but his knees buckled, and he fell back into the chair. The girl caught his hand, her voice shaking as she begged him not to push himself further. The ship reacted to her touch. For the first time since it had awakened, it responded to her. A strand of light moved from the controls and wrapped gently around her wrist. She gasped, her body trembling, but she did not pull away. The glow warmed her skin, and suddenly she felt it, the heartbeat of the vessel, deep and steady. The ship had accepted her, even if only a little. She looked at the human in disbelief and whispered that it wanted her to help him. He opened his eyes, barely able to focus, and gave her a tired smile. He told her to trust it. His voice was weak but certain. She hesitated for a moment, fear clawing at her chest, then placed both hands on the controls. The blue light spread up her arms, and her body shuddered as visions filled her mind. She saw stars, planets, ancient battles, and the builders who had created this ship long ago. She saw their purpose, to protect, to guide, and to fight when needed. Her breath came fast, her eyes wide with awe. The human's grip on the controls loosened as the ship shared its bond with her. She felt his pain through the connection, every strain of his muscles, every spark of his courage. Tears burned in her eyes. She realized that he had carried all of this weight alone until now. No alien had ever been chosen, but somehow she was allowed to stand beside him. The ship was giving her a chance to carry part of the burden. Alarms suddenly echoed through the vessel. The girl's head snapped up, her heart racing again. Enemy signals flashed across the glowing walls. The Queen's fleet had not been destroyed completely. Reinforcements were already on their way, closing in fast. The girl's stomach twisted. She had no idea how to control a living ship, no idea how to fight with it. Fear made her want to run, but then she felt the human's faint pulse through the bond. His strength was failing, yet he still faced the danger without fear. The girl closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She whispered that she would not let him fall. She gripped the controls tighter, letting the ship's energy flow through her veins. Suddenly, the vessel responded, moving like a great beast shaking off chains. The engines roared, and the ship darted forward with a speed that made her gasp. The stars blurred past them as she guided it away from the ruined world, weaving through asteroids and broken debris. Enemy warships appeared behind them, firing streams of red fire. The human stirred weakly, trying to take the controls back, but she pressed her hand over his and told him to rest. Her voice was firm now, stronger than she had ever felt before. The ship's weapons opened with her command, blue beams shooting back and tearing through the pursuers. She felt every strike like thunder in her chest, every dodge like wind rushing through her blood. The human looked at her with tired eyes, but there was pride in his face. He whispered that she was part of it now, that the ship had accepted her. She shook her head, tears slipping free, saying she was not worthy. But he told her worth was not given by bloodlines or councils. It was proven in the moment you chose to fight for something bigger than yourself. The girl's heart ached at his words. All her life she had believed she was beneath the higher castes, beneath the council, beneath the queen. But here she was, guiding the most sacred vessel of her people, side by side with a human who had no royal blood, no sacred title. And the ship obeyed her. For the first time in her life, she felt free. The battle outside raged as more ships closed in. The alien fleet surrounded them, a net tightening with every passing second. The girl's hands shook on the controls, fear threatening to overwhelm her. Then she felt his hand rest gently over hers. His voice was low but steady as he told her to listen, not with her ears but with her heart. The ship would show her the way. She closed her eyes again, and the visions returned. She saw paths of light weaving through the darkness, safe passages between enemy fire, weak points in the blockade. Her lips parted in awe as the answers unfolded before her. She followed them, steering the ship with instinct, weaving through blasts, striking with precision. Enemy vessels exploded around them, the space filled with burning fragments, but the ship carried them through unharmed. When the last pursuer fell behind, silence returned once more. The girl slumped forward, gasping for breath, her arms shaking. She opened her eyes and looked at the human. He was still weak, but there was a spark of life in his eyes again. He whispered that she had done it. She shook her head, saying she only survived because of him. But he smiled faintly, telling her that together they had done what no one else could. The ship pulsed softly around them, its glow calm and steady now, as if approving their bond. The girl sank to her knees beside him, her chest rising and falling quickly. She realized that she was no longer only his guide, and he was no longer only the chosen. They were something more now, partners tied together by the living heart of the ship. Outside, the stars stretched endless and full of promise. The war was not over, and the queen would not stop hunting them. But in this moment, as the ship carried them forward, the girl knew she was no longer afraid. Together, with the human, she could face anything the galaxy would throw at them. The ship descended slowly toward the planet's surface, its glowing body lighting the dark skies like a second sun. The human sat upright now, stronger, though still pale from the battles. The alien girl stood beside him, her hands tight on the glowing wall as she stared down at the city of her people. Fires burned in the streets where debris from the destroyed fleet had fallen, and crowds gathered in the plazas, their voices rising in confusion, fear, and awe. They had all seen it, the sacred vessel alive once more, flying under the command of a human no one expected. As the ship lowered, soldiers filled the streets, forming lines with weapons ready. The council stood on the great platform, their faces twisted with anger and fear. They had ruled with power for generations, but now their control was slipping. The prophecy, once a story they used to keep hope alive, was standing before them in flesh and light. The girl's breath trembled as she whispered that they would never accept him. Not willingly. The ship landed with a deep hum, its energy pushing back the dust. The barrier around it pulsed once before fading. The human stepped out first, his boots striking the stone floor with steady weight. The girl followed, her heart pounding as thousands of eyes locked on them. Whispers ran through the crowd, voices trembling, some in worship, others in rage. The high voice of the council shouted that this was blasphemy, that no outsider could ever be the sky bearer. that the ship had been stolen and defiled. His words rang across the plaza, strong and furious, but they did not drown out the murmurs of the people. Many had seen the human fight. They had seen the queen's fleet broken. They had seen the ancient lights glowing only for him. The queen herself stepped forward, her armor shining black, her presence heavy as a storm. She raised her blade and declared that the human would die by her hand. Her voice shook the ground, commanding loyalty, demanding blood. The girl's knees weakened. She knew what her queen was capable of. Yet the human stood tall, his eyes calm, his shoulders straight, as if no fear lived in him. The queen charged, her blade sparking with red energy. The crowd gasped, pulling back in terror. The human did not move until the last moment. Then the ship reacted. From the plaza behind them, lines of blue light surged outward, forming a shield between him and the queen's strike. The impact roared like thunder, sparks flying, the queen stumbling back in shock. The crowd froze in silence. The girl's heart pounded as she realized the truth. The ship was not protecting itself anymore. It was protecting him. It had chosen not just a pilot, but a guardian of their future. She shouted that the prophecy had been fulfilled, her voice breaking through the silence. People turned toward her, their eyes wide, their whispers rising into cries. Some knelt, some shouted his name, others wept openly. The queen's face twisted with fury. She raised her blade again, but her own soldiers hesitated. Many lowered their weapons, their loyalty shaken. They had grown up hearing the old stories. Now those stories stood before them in living light. The queen roared at them to obey, but doubt had already spread. The human did not attack. He raised his voice, strong and steady, speaking not in threats but in truth. He said he had not come to steal their ship or their future. He said the vessel was alive, and it had chosen. Not by bloodlines, not by crowns, not by fear, but by spirit. He told them that their galaxy was full of dangers, old enemies hidden in the stars, and that if they kept fighting among themselves, they would all fall. His words echoed, simple yet unshakable. The girl's chest ached as she watched the people listen. She had never seen her kind so quiet, so uncertain, so full of conflict. And then, slowly, voices rose, not in anger, but in chants. They called him the Skybearer, the Chosen One, the leader they had waited for. Their cries rolled across the plaza like waves, drowning the queen's fury. The council, pale and shaken, stepped back. They could not command the people anymore. The queen screamed with rage, but her power was slipping away, her soldiers no longer certain whom they served. Her blade dropped lower, her steps uncertain, as if even she felt the truth pressing against her. The girl stepped forward, her voice steady now. She said the ship had not only chosen him, it had chosen her too. She told the crowd that she had seen the visions, touched the stars, felt the bond. Together, they were no longer bound by fear or by bloodlines. Together, they were something new. The people cheered louder, their voices shaking the air. The queen staggered back, her pride shattered, her army broken. She turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the plaza behind. The council followed, their robes dragging like chains. The human stood at the center, not as an outsider anymore, but as a symbol of change. The girl looked up at him, her eyes full of awe and fear and something deeper. She whispered that nothing would ever be the same again. He gave her a small, tired smile and said that was the point. He lifted his gaze to the ship, its glowing body towering above them, star maps still alive within its walls. That night, as the people sang and wept in the streets, the ship pulsed brighter, casting its light across the city. The human stood with the girl at his side, both of them knowing the journey was only beginning. Beyond their skies, the ancient maps waited, filled with lost worlds, hidden dangers, and new futures. The prophecy had awakened not just a ship, but a new legend. And now, with the galaxy watching, they would carry it forward together.